Tiny Tim was one of the most curious, eccentric figures in the late 1960s. With his ukulele and high-pitched falsetto voice, he was the man who, popularizing the 1929 song Tiptoe Through the Tulips with a broad, he performed in several vocal ranges, venues, including the prestigious The Johnny Carson Show, but Tiny Tim was never allowed to return to the show after he did. What could the quirky singer have done to warrant a no return from us? Such a popular show will investigate everything, that and more, in today's video, before he became the oddball singer that he was. Tiny Tim led a reasonably regular life. Born as Herbert Brose Carey on April the 12th. In 1932, he was in Manhattan, New York. He is the son of Tilly and Brose Carey. He had an intriguing lineage. The mother was of Polish-Jewish origin. While his father was from Beirut, little Carey himself grew up as a devotee. Catholic, and like many musicians before, he had a strong leaning towards music at an early age. It's all thanks to the phonograph his father gave him. When he was 5, he would continually listen to Henry Burr's Beautiful Ohio. The following year, young Carey he learnt guitar by himself, which showed beneficial. He shifted to a different. The guitar is a musical instrument that was later. Years later, when he grew older, appearances in shows, Kai thanked Burr. What's so special about his singing style? More fascinating about the would-be singer is that he was also interested in the history of music, particularly from the 1900s until the 1930s, he developed an interest into Hart and spent many hours reading. He did his best at the New York Public. The library pays significant attention to the first recording artists, everything compared to a phonograph. His enormous knowledge of these subjects made him walking encyclopedia of ancient musicals melodies that influenced his singing style because of his vast knowledge of old-school music. Little did he realize. This enthusiasm of his changed him somewhat, becoming an archivist. He was already pretty deep in his love for music, although it became even more visible when he had to undergo surgery to remove his appendix at the age of 122, staying in the hospital for recovery. Corey had music and a Bible too, his interest in music. Become so intense, he couldn't longer concentrate on anything else that was. Why did he leave high school so soon? After that, he took on other odd jobs. Jobs while doing as much music as he, as mediocre as it may sound, it is actually one of the most unforgettable years. Going so far as to name these years, a religious experience for the youth Cowie was here when he learned he could actually sing. In a higher register, thanks to he was listening to popular American crooner, Rudy Valley Corey also avoided the guitar and moved to playing ukulele, which became his characteristic instrument when he arrived stardom with the new singing. Cowie had his unique style and did many menial employment, and it was during his eyes were open to these jobs. Young people in the entertainment business, Kyrie managed to get a job as a message to Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Studios. Here, he tried his luck. I auditioned for a local talent show utilizing his just-developed falsetto voice, sang an old-time American hit. You Are My Sunshine key did not win, but did give him the courage to continue. He soon discovered that singing on stage, himself performing in late night clubs and bars under multiple personalities in the club, he was known as Texarkana, while with another club he was Vernon Castle and Judas K. Foxglove to another. As if his high falsetto voice hadn't. Notably, Cree went above and beyond, mile and dressed up to stand out. From the rest, he painted his face white, drawing inspiration from the Italian. Rudolph Valentino, an actor, dressed eccentrically. He grew out his hair into a wild man, is alarmed at the extensive K's mother nearly experienced a wardrobe change. He was examined by a psychiatrist at Notorious, Bellevue Hospital. If only his father did not meddle just like that. Kay's singing career began. He sang at many venues, but he frequently did. It was only in 1959 that Kay began to attract interested attention. Eventually, he was able to find manager, a man named George King. He delivered an eye-catching performance at Larry Used to Love the Singing Canary. Visit Hubert's Museum and Live Flea Circus. In Times Square, recognizing his potential, Kyrie was sent by several unpaid auditioning for his new manager throughout Greenwich Village. Little did he realize his life was about to alter forever. When Carey performed what would become his defining track and famous rendition of Tiptoe Through the Tulips, he landed. His first paid gig, playing at a lesbian run club, opened 6 days a week for 6 hours and was paid $96 for his work. Unfortunately, his first paid gig as a newbie performer for the next few years, he still has no defined stage name, fluctuated between Derry Do and Sir Timothy Tim's on-stage persona. It was not until King, his manager, agreed to call him Tiny Tim, thanks to Act Corey. Followed once, and it became. Since then, his stage name has been It's Pretty Ironic, given that Cowie was nothing less than his stature-standing Kari, who is nearly 6 feet 1 inch tall, is now known as Tiny Tim. He was booked and busy during the 1960s, performing in many TV shows and making cameos, like in Jack Smith's Normal Love even. Performed a duet alongside Eleanor Berrien and sang I Got You, Sonny and Cher's falsetto rendition of Babe. Of course, Tiny Tim took on Cher's. It helped his career tremendously. You understand what negative publicity means. Still exposure. So when he made his debut on the M.V. Griffin Show in 1966. There were demonstrations, and many of the viewers even claimed he was a thing. Still, Kai went on, and his stint with Baruchin secured him a booking in the comedy sitcom Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In' Dan. Rowan, the show's co-host, appeared on The Look for New Talent, and Tiny Tim fits. Right to tea on the day of his Tiny Tim stepped onto the scene with his customary shaggy hair and quirky attire. He has a ukulele in his shopping bag. They delivered a rendition of the popular, the nursery rhyme, a tisket, a tasket, and on The Good Ship Lollipop, which was popularized by the little actress Shirley Temple. These were 2 short tunes. Tiny Tim's portrayal of them hit Dick Martin felt a chord in his heart since then. Tiny Tim made several more appearances at the show, but not until he makes his second and third outings. Tiptoe Through the Tulips. Compared to the M.V. Griffin Show, laughing was more welcome of the unusual singer that this is why it did not come as a surprise. He made several more appearances on the show for the next few years. By the late 1960s, Tiny Tim began gaining ground. By 1968, his music had gained appeal. He has finally published his debut album, titled God Bless Tiny Tim. He added Tiptoe Through the Tulips from this album, and charted at the number 17 position on the Billboard chart, proving his Tiny Tim gained popularity the same year. Published a follow-up album named Tiny. Tim's second album features an album cover. He has photos of himself with his parents. Consistently released 1 album per year. Since then, with the 1969 release of For All My Little Friends Who Earned, he received a Grammy Award nomination. A frequent everywhere from TV appearances. Listen to his tunes playing on the radio. It also showed how some members of the public were unsure about him. Was Tiny Tim acting Ash's genuine self, or was it all an act? Just to stand out anyway, Tiny Tim's. Despite this, popularity continued to rise. In these exposés, there was only one television. Tiny Tim made a memorable appearance. Many people's minds, not because of his performance but because of what back then. Even the show's host was completely stunned by Before Tiny. Tim's popularity dropped. He starred on The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson, which was the prime TV show at the time. Tiny Tim performed one of the most unexpected. He married his bride, Miss Vicky's live TV appearance on December 17th, 1969. Image how huge of a stir manufactured, especially since 40 million. People were tuned in, watching at the show's host, Johnny Carson. He constantly made sure that his guests, we may be comfortable in his shows. Assume Tiny Tim had a little too. He felt at ease throughout his appearance to do a stunt like that, because that was all. Tiny Tim was always in excellent spirits, said. Foot on the Sage show set again. Nonetheless, Carson was among many who believed that Tiny Tim was genuine, human, and he was not putting on an act for performance's sake. He knew the singer was only being genuine to himself. Tiny Tim was a pretty weird man. I managed to attract an equally odd figure in the form of an Australian artist, Martin Sharp. Despite Tiny Tim's success, was not extensively celebrated in America. Because of his oddity, he discovered excellent companionship and admiration. In Sharp, an Australian artist was captivated by him. He brought the odd singer to the land underperform, a task that has never been done before. Record the longest professional singing performance. Marathon. Non-stop Sharp produced outstanding work for this cause, bringing Tiny Tim back and forth to his homeland, until finally they managed to push through. The entire singing is recorded. Marathon performance took more than 2 hours. After 17 minutes, and ultimately broke the world record was set in January 1979. It is vital to note Sharp's attention. Tiny Tim was not restricted to the latter's musical powers are tremendous. He was interested in musical expertise. Overall, the vocalist is that. He even produced recordings painted Tiny Tim in various techniques, expressing his respect for the singer. One of his creations is a big tulip-themed mural of the unusual singer hangs in the Macquarie University Student Council at Macquarie University today. One can even call it a borderline obsession. A man like Sharp would not have a Street of Dreams is a Sharp made a film that can consider an attempt to uncover the truth about the 1979 ghost train fire that happened at Luna Park in Sydney. While double as Tiny Tim's biography, Sharp believed in the disastrous episode was somewhat linked. Due to Tiny Tim's performance, he set out to prove that it was so. Unfortunately, Sharp never got around to finishing the film, but crucial trims and sections were released for a film festival, screenings that can still be watched today. Even if he didn't manage to finish, Street of Dreams Sharp dedicated a lot of his time to assist Tiny Tim to put. He oversaw the release of his record into the world. Some of Tiny Tim's tracks for his songs like Rock Chameleon and Keeping Troubles to Myself Little is known. Tiny Tim's private life. But what? All we know is that the quirky vocalist, he had 3 marriages, had multiple relationships with different people, women and men in the earliest parts. Even if he were 2, she was effeminate and not the pinnacle of the public's perception of a man was tiny. Tim drew numerous women into his first marriage. Miss Vicky's true name was Victoria Banger, and the same woman. He got married during his guest visit on The Tonight Show, starring John Carson. What's a little disturbing about their Miss Vicky married when she was only 17 years old? She was years old when she married. Tiny Tim, 37 years old, and they had a daughter called Tulip Victoria, who was born in 1971. Previously, the couple would have, because had Miss Vicky not endured, miscarriage occurred in May 1970, while Minneapolis. The couple named him, buried him in Memorial Oak Cemetery. Unfortunately, the baby landlocked. The marriage lasted for 8 years, till they finally called it quits in 1977. Tiny Tim's second marriage was with Jan Alves in 1984, whom he endearingly called Miss Jan, but as with his first marriage, he divorced for the third time. Miss Sue's final marriage occurred in 1994, whose real name was Susan Marie Gardner. Miss Sue claimed to be a fan of his. Since the age of 12, she has been faithful to Tiny Tim, lasted till his sad demise. I had a quick brush with death when the van he was in collided with another vehicle while he was on tour. 1873. It turns out that the driver, the automobile fell asleep at the wheel, resulting in a catastrophic accident. Left Tiny Tim with multiple broken ribs, a collapsed lung thoracic. He made a good recovery. However, this was a 4-month hospital stay. This is a critical time for him because all of his funds were drained for his care. Recovery led to his manager's departure. He went on to perform for a few. More decades passed before death came, knocking. The first was on Tiny Tim's door. On September 28, 1996, he suffered a cardiac attack occurred immediately after recording video interview at Monagu Bookmill, when he was attending a ukulele festival and was transported to Franklin County Medical Center, where he spent following his release, he'll spend the next 3 weeks resting. He was urged not to perform again because of his physical state. Given that the 64-year-old had diabetes and congestive heart failure, but Tiny Tim ignored all of this. Continued to do so nearly 2 months later. Tiny Tim finally met our maker. November 30th, 1996. Despite the doctor's advice to leave his musical career behind, Tiny Tim went ahead and participated. The gala benefit held by the Women's Club of Minneapolis. Just before the Make It Obvious that he was not feeling well, he informed his wife. Miss Sue had asked about his condition. Knew what will happen in a few hours. Later, Miss Sue would have stopped her spouse from taking the stage, delivering his final act, but we don't. I believe it would have made a difference if she went ahead and stopped her husband. Tiny Tim was adamant about playing. He would rather not disappoint. Despite feeling ill, he climbed up and performed even if more than half of the attendees had already left, and he was performing Tiptoe Through the Tulips. Tiny Tim lost yet another heart. I was attacked in the middle of it. He was promptly hustled backstage. Being ushered, Miss Sue questioned if he was okay, to which he answered, "No, I'm Tiny Tim's." Final words were "not." The famous musician collapsed, then and there in his wife's arms. Before the paramedics arrived to rush, unfortunately, they brought him to the hospital. We were unable to resuscitate the eccentric singer despite desperately trying for 45 minutes. Straight on November 30th, 1996, Tiny Tim was declared around 11:20 p.m. Tiny Tim died 4 years after his death. The previous label, Rhino Handmade, released a live album of songs by the departed vocalist named Tiny Tim, Live at the Royal Albert Hall. All of the songs were recorded. Tiny Tim reaches his peak under Reprise. Records, but the label did not release. In addition to never-before-heard or viewed records, biographies of the singer were released, such as in 2009, release of Justin Martel's Eternal Troubadour, The Improbable Life of Tiny Tim. Martel is known as one of the U.S.'s experts on Tiny Tim. There's another Lowell wrote a biography on the performer. Taring wrote Tiny Tim. Tiptoe Through a Lifetime was released back in July 2013. In 2020, Swedish director and filmmaker Johan von Sato has also released Tiny is a documentary about the singer Tim. King for a Day documentary. Various snippets and footage of Tiny Tim are shown where he is depicted. His raw and unadulterated form reveals his eccentricity wasn't he was simply being himself today. Some of us may know and perhaps remember him because of his version of Tiptoe Through the Tulips with Me was utilized in. The initial installment of the American Insidious is a horror franchise. However, fairly, his music may be heard in popular animated series SpongeBob, Dot, and SquarePants, where Tiny Tim lives. Sunlight may be heard throughout the pilot episode.